I'm going to turn this other stars layer back on. I'm going to zoom out a little now. And I'm going to set this bottom stars layer, the one with all the black on it still, to screen. Now I'm going to set this stars layer, I'm going to leave that at normal, and this outer glow I'm going to set to overlay. Now I'm going to turn the rest of my layers back on. So I'm just going to start clicking and turning all these layers back on. Just like this. And you can see that we've got a pretty crazy effect going on. It looks like there are a whole lot of stars. However, if you zoom in, you can see there are far less stars than it appears. However, this secondary stars layer, I am going to grab my move tool, and I'm just going to move it. Or no, I'm not going to move it off to that side. That makes it look like there's more stars. I'm going to decrease the opacity, bring that down to about 50. That looks pretty good. Zoom back out. I save my document once again. And let me zoom in one more time. And it looks like the stars layer is not aligned properly, as I expected. Just like that. Shut it off, turn it on. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now, what I want to do is blur this outer glow layer, this layer right here. I'm going to come up here, filter, choose blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to give it about, let's try 3 pixel, no, 5 pixel blur looks pretty good. See, that's what that's doing for us. Now, I want to create a couple more burn layers, so let's come up here and create another new layer. Let's name it Burn 3. I'm going to zoom out a couple, and I'm going to grab that clouds brush again, right there, and make sure my foreground color is set to black. I am going to increase the spacing a little bit here, to around 35, maybe 40, and let's start painting in. Burning in more of the sky, giving the sky more texture. Just like this, right here over our planet, that's fine. And I'm going to set this layer to soft light. I'm going to create another burn layer. Burn 4. I like to create my burns on individual layers so I can go through and shut them off and turn them on to see what exactly they're all doing. I'm going to decrease my brush size a little bit. And I'm going to come in here, I'm going to burn in some kind of sections in the sky here. Just like that, that's pretty good. Set this one to soft light as well, that layer, soft light. So now that we've done all that burning, let's do a little bit of dodging. Create a new layer and name it Dodge 1. All we have to do here is switch our foreground and background color, hit the X key to quickly do that. I'm going to increase my brush size and just begin dodging into some of these areas that I have not really burned, or not burned very severely at least. Basically, this is just going to increase the contrast up here in the sky. I'm going to dodge in all these areas here and set this to soft light. See there, before and after. Looks pretty good. And it really looks like we've got an excessive amount of stars, so much so that it's kind of distracting. So I'm going to come down here to this stars layer, and I'm going to create a mask real quick, and I'm just going to paint in, grab a solid brush up here, and let's just grab big 100 pixel soft edge brush, uncheck shape dynamics. And I'm going to increase my brush size. I'm just going to paint away all of these stars down here. And that makes it much easier to sort of look at here. Now, one thing I am noticing is it looks like I've got a little bit too much burning. So I'm going to come up to this burn layer. I'm just going to reduce the opacity just a little bit. Maybe take it down to 60. Save my document. Okay, let's zoom in here to 100% so we can really get an up-close and personal view of our sky, which is kind of tough to do. You know what? I'm going to close these those panels. I'm going to collapse my layers panel temporarily, remove my brushes panel off screen just so we can get a better look at what's going on up here in the sky. Reduce that to 50. Okay, I am going to select my layers panel here and create another burn layer, this one on top of the dodge layer. Double click and call it Burn 5. You know what, this dodge layer here, Try setting that to overlay instead. That looks better as overlay, excuse me, not soft light. Come up here to burn 5 and grab the brush tool. Let's grab the brushes palette. Double click that and just check shape dynamics on. Choose brush tip shape and let's select that same clouds brush we've been using. And I'm going to do some burning here, just as we have been doing. Again, burning in all of these areas, just like that. Alright, I'm going to select that layer, set it to soft light, close up the layers panel, and I'm going to put a touch of burning right back there. Still on that burn 5 layer. Okay, so now let's create a layer on top of all the rest of these layers. Let's turn our cloud three-dimensionality on there. Matter of fact, let's up the opacity of our cloud shadows a little bit, as well as the opacity of our cloud shadowing. Let's create a new layer on top of the rest of these and call this layer Horizon Shadow. Maybe that seems like a fitting name for it. I'm going to select that layer. I'm just going to collapse this layers panel to get that out of the way. Grab the lasso tool and I'm just going to start drawing a rather jagged shape, kind of like this, just across here and back across, just like that. That's perfect. Hold down my shift key and I'm going to make sure I add in that edge there. Okay, let's come up here to filter, render clouds. We just filled our selection with clouds. Very nice. Command-Control-D to deselect that. Alright, it looks kind of strange, I have to say. Go Image, Adjustments, Levels, and let's increase some contrast here. Let's pull blacks in, and pull the whites in, and maybe shift the gray toward white. Pull some more blacks in, pull some more whites in. Hit OK. And now come up here, select Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and the Motion Blur dialog box is right there. I'm going to blur this on a slight angle, maybe right around 38 degrees. Let's just go even and go with 45. And I'm going to blur it quite a bit, maybe like 300 pixels. Alright, just like that. That looks pretty good. Open up the Layers panel and duplicate this layer, Command or Control J. And duplicate it one more time, Command or Control J. And now hit Command or Control E to merge, and Command or Control E to merge again. So now all of that strange shape is on one layer. Collapse the layers panel again. Now grab the brush tool. Well, actually, before we do this, create a new layer and hold down Alt or Option and clip that layer before we even put anything on it to that horizon shadow layer. Make sure we select that layer and we're going to call it H Shadows. Close up that layers panel and reduce the size of our humongous clouds brush here. And I'm leaving it set to black, and I'm just going to start painting in some shadow into this shape here. Wherever I see fit, I'll put some shadowing. Right up through here, over here. Basically any area where there's some gray already, I'm going to put some shadowing. And then down over here. Alright, open up the layers panel. I'm just going to set that to soft light as we have been doing. And actually, I'm going to blur that a little too. Go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and a 5-pixel blur is nice. Create another new layer and clip this again to the rest of those layers holding the Alt or Option key. Double click that to name it, and we're going to name this H Highs. For the highlights, hit X to switch your foreground and background color, and now we are painting with white. Alright, I'm just painting basically along all of these edges here where highlights would probably be bouncing off. Whoops, and not over that shadow. There. In through here. Basically just trying to add as much contrast as I can. Make this kind of blur shape more interesting. Okay, and I'm going to open up my layers panel again, set that to soft light. And that doesn't really look like it needs to be blurred. However, I will still blur it a little bit. Gaussian blur again. 2-pixel blur this time. Hit OK. That's looking pretty sharp. We're going to select all these layers and merge them all together. We're going to do that by just simply hitting Command or Control E and then Command or Control E again to merge all of those layers together. We're going to now Gaussian blur the whole thing. I just have that horizon shadow layer selected, filter, and we'll go blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to give it about an 8-pixel blur. Hit OK. Again, we're going to go Image Adjustments Levels just to jack up this contrast. Drag the black slider in just a little bit, and drag the white slider in a little bit more. That's looking pretty good. Go into the Layers panel, and let's set this layer to Color Burn right there. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, it looks a little severe, and we'll take care of that with some masking in just a second. We're going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and I'm going to set it back to normal, and I'm going to go Edit, Free Transform, right-click the Free Transform inside of the Free Transform box, and just hit Flip Horizontal. Select the check, and we're going to set this to Color Dodge. Close up, or no, I'm not going to close up the Layers panel yet. I need to apply a layer mask to both of these layers. Select the little layer mask icon. Alright, I'm going to work on the bottom one first. Select the layer mask. Make sure you have a black brush. We're going to choose a nice 100 or so pixel soft edged brush. Let's make it a little bigger than 100 pixels. Let's try about 200. And I'm going to start painting over the planet number 1 to, or not, I don't want to paint over the planet on this. I want to paint outside of the planet here for this, move the layers panel. For this bottom layer, we want to paint outside of the planet. And for the top layer, we want to paint inside of the planet. Get rid of some of that craziness that's going on inside of there. It's going wild. And let's reduce the opacity of this bottom layer just a little bit. It's still kind of driving that planet pretty crazy. Let's also reduce the opacity of the top layer just a little bit. Now for the bottom layer, I do, however, want to get rid of that one little area there where it's making the planet kind of go green. Looks kind of weird. And there we go. I'm going to drag the Layers panel back into my dock. And here's what we've got so far. Let's save this. Command or Control S. Okay, we need to create another shadow type thing. However, before we do that, I just want to come in here and kind of correct all these messy edges here. I believe it, yeah, it's the one here on top going kind of crazy on us. And just collapse the Layers panel. I'm working on that top layer, the mask of the top layer. Basically anywhere you see that kind of strange effect going on. Alright, we can get rid of those layers and then bring them back. You can see it is doing quite a bit there. Up here on top. Okay. Now, we need to create another new layer. We're going to name this layer Clouds Lower. Collapse that Layers panel. Working on the Clouds Lower layer. I'm going to grab my brush panel and I'm going to choose my Clouds brush again. Big surprise, right? Check on Shape Dynamics and get this thing out of here. Well, actually, real quick, brush tip shape, we're going to increase the spacing, about to 40 again. Move that off screen. And I'm going to use my left bracket key to size this brush down. By the way, if you want to quickly size a brush down, you can also just right click and it brings up this little adjusting dialog here. I find it's much faster to just use the bracket keys though. Alright, we're going to bring our flow back up to 100%. We've been using that at 70 for quite some time now. And basically, I just want to paint. That brush is a little too big. I want to paint kind of the same type of shape that we just created using the lasso tool. Just with these sharp edges, really just can be any kind of, random shape. Make my brush slightly bigger. Just like this, pretty good. Just painting, creating sort of these jagged, almost teeth, you could think of them as. And then just bringing it down here, which really isn't going to matter down here because all of this is going to be covered up by a different part of what we are drawing here. And I am going to grab my brush and I'm just going to soften my brush up, or my eraser, excuse me, set that to 0 hardness, and I'm just going to erase some of this over here. It's just a tad bit too much. Don't worry about getting that soft edge because we are going to blur this whole thing in just a moment. Select the Clouds Lower layer, excuse me, Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we're going to blur it about 8, maybe 10. 10 looks pretty good, hit OK. Let me move this off here so I can see over there. Okay, not bad. I'm going to open up my Layers panel and I'm going to duplicate that layer, Command or Control J. Looking good. Maybe one more time. Now I'm going to hit Command or Control Z to undo that. I only want to do it twice. And hit Command or Control E to merge those two layers together. These clouds are now on their own layer. It's perfect. It's exactly what I was looking for. Collapse that layers panel. Let's grab the Move tool. Holding down the Alt key, we can click and drag this layer over to create a copy of it. Or I don't know if I want to do that or not. No, I don't. So I'm just going to hit Edit, Undo, and then step backward. Alright, so we just have our Clouds Lower layer. Now what we need to do is create a new layer, and we're going to name it Clouds Lower Color. Hit Enter, return to commit that change, select that layer, and collapse the layers panel again. Alright, I'm going to use my brush tool, set to about the same thing, and I'm going to grab a dark blue from somewhere up here in the sky. Just using my eyedropper. Hit B to get back to my brush tool. Make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to start painting with this brush. Just sort of random strokes in here. We're going to be adding some other colors, so don't worry too much about getting the whole thing covered up. Just get it started with this blue. Right up around the edge there. Now I'm going to grab a very light pink or light magenta from the sky. Right about there. Looks pretty good. B. By the way, I hit I to switch to my eyedropper tool. That's the hotkey, in case you missed that. B to go back to the brush tool. And now I'm going to start painting in pink. Don't worry, we're going to use a clipping mask again to clip this whole thing to that shape underneath. We're going to add one more color to it, so don't worry if you're kind of missing out. We may actually add two colors if you're missing some areas of it or if you're moving off of it. Just keep painting, painting, painting. This is where a tablet comes in real handy when you have to do this kind of stuff. Okay, grab your color selector, your color picker, color selector, and go to the blues and just select a very light blue, kind of like that. Hit OK, and paint with some of this light blue into here. Just like this. And last but not least, we're going to add a little bit of yellow as well, just because we've got quite a bit of yellow going on because of our kind of yellow planet there. So just a little bit of yellow, maybe a couple accent sort of things with yellow. Just kind of like that. That's looking pretty good. Now, go back to layers, and we've got our clouds lower color. We're going to hold down the Alt key and clip that to the clouds lower layer. You can see what that did. Pretty nice. Save our document, Command or Control S. Let's shut off the visibility of that layer by clicking the little eyeball. Select Clouds Lower and set this to Hard Light. And that did nothing. Oh yes, because let's go back to normal real quick. Control click our Clouds Lower, and we need to come up here and go Filter, Render Clouds. And we've got some crazy colors here because our foreground and background are not set properly. So undo that. Hit the D key to set the foreground and background color to black and white. Filter, Clouds. Go up here, Image, Adjustments, Levels, and we're just going to jack up the contrast, just as we have been doing. Hit OK. And now we're going to increase the overall brightness of this whole thing, kind of like we just had it. Go Levels and just pull the white up. Go OK, and Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and we're just going to bring the brightness up because I really want those blacks to come up, but they do not want to come up. So we're just going to leave it at that, brightness, and now set that to Hard Light, and you can see we've got something happening there. Very interesting. Turn on our colors again, and we're going to set these to, let's try Linear Burn, or maybe Color Burn. Well, let's go back to Linear Burn. I'm kind of liking that. If we reduce the opacity to about 50 or so, that ought to look pretty decent. That looks pretty darn good. It's a little too much black in there, so I'm going to mask my clouds lower layer. So I'm going to pop a mask on that layer, and using my, I'll just keep my clouds brush tool, and let's increase that to about 165-ish, and we're just going to paint with the clouds brush right in there to kind of uncover the planet, which is quickly becoming engulfed. And let's just lighten up some of these dark spots a little on the dark side. So I'm just tapping with the brush a little bit to lighten them up. Just like that. That's pretty nice. Alright, again, save the document, Command or Control S. Okay, now one last thing to do before we are done with the sky. Create another new layer. Double click and call this Horizon Line. And, whoops, close that layers panel up. Grab about a 100 pixel soft edged brush. Make it a little bigger than that, maybe around 150 approximately. And let's grab a kind of magenta color. Let's grab one of these darker magentas, kind of like that, right here. That's pretty good. Hit OK. And with the brush tool, just start right about where the horizon is going to be. Just click once, hold down the Shift key, and click on the other side of the document. Just like that. We draw a straight line. However, that was not quite straight. There we go. Straight line by holding the Shift key and just clicking once, and then clicking wherever you want the line to go to. So there we got a straight, nice straight horizon line. All right, I'm going next to start working on the water. Open up the layers panel and select all these layers. I've got that top layer selected, horizon line. I'm going to come all the way down here and Shift click sky, and then I'm going to come up here to layer, and I'm going to choose group layers. And I'm going to double click the group name. I'm going to name it sky. Alrighty, create another new layer. Name this water. Finally, onto the water. Grab the rectangular marquee tool. Actually, let me open up the layers panel. We're going to come in here to the sky. This horizon line, I want to bump it up a little bit. I just hit V to grab my selection tool. And I'm just Shift and hitting the up arrow key to move that up. Alright, back to the water layer. Select that water layer. Grab the rectangular marquee tool and draw a selection that goes from about the middle of that horizon line that we just drew and covers the entire bottom of the document. Set the foreground color to a somewhat light blue and leave the background as white. Go Filter, Clouds. Just filled that entire area with some clouds. Alright, we're going to increase the contrast, Image, Adjustments, Levels. We're going to jack up the darks in the image to make those blues a little darker, and the whites to really kind of push the contrast through the roof. I'm going to drag the white, or the gray slider, excuse me, toward the whites just a little bit. You don't want to get rid of too many of the whites. Hit OK. You can deselect that, Command or Control D. Now go Filter, Filter Gallery. And this is going to kind of move off screen here. So let me make it a bit smaller. There we go. Alrighty. We've got this going on over here, and let me delete that. Alright, first filter that we need to do is a sponge filter. Come under the artistic folder and choose sponge. Alright, and let's play around with these settings. I believe this is what I want though. Brush size at 6, definition around 10 or 11, and then smoothness, push that down to 3 or 4. I'm going to stick with 4 for now. Okay, now create a new effect layer, or a new filter layer here. You can see it automatically has a setback to sponge. Don't worry about that. We're going to choose plastic wrap now. And we are going to set the highlights. Let's reduce the highlights a little bit, maybe to around 9. And the detail, let's increase that a tad bit, maybe to 11 or so. And then the smoothness, we want to make sure the smoothness is down pretty low. We're down around 3 should work for us. So that is sponge. Brush size 6, definition 11, and smoothness 4. Plastic wrap, the highlight strength is 9, detail is 11, and smoothness is 3. Hit OK. We've got ourselves some water here. Let's zoom out a couple. Control minus a couple times. This is a little small now. Hit Command or Control T, and right click on this and hit Perspective. Pull the bottom handle out. So you can see we're really stretching this water out. Right click and hit Free Transform and push this up just kind of like that. That looks pretty good. Select the check button and zoom back in a couple. Alright, there is our water. That looks pretty good. I want to go Adjustments, Levels, and make the blues a wee bit darker and the whites a slight bit lighter. Hit OK. Alright, we've got some nice water there. We want to do a couple things to this water. Well, first, now that I'm looking at it, I want to hit Control L or Command L, which will bring me back into levels, and I want to add some more whites to it. Push the gray slider toward the white. That's pretty good. Right there, hit OK. Now I'm going to come into filter liquefy. Again, way off screen. Don't worry, I'll get myself back on. Here we go. Grab the magnifying glass. I'm going to zoom out one. And I can just hold my spacebar key and use the hand tool to navigate around in here. I'm going to grab this wave tool, and I'm just going to basically create some waves there along where the horizon is. Remember, this is much bigger than you're looking at it, so don't go too crazy with the wave tool. Otherwise, you'll start to make it look really bad really quickly. And kind of push all the waves in the same direction, so it almost looks like the water is traveling one direction. Okay, that looks good. I just selected that wave tool. I've got my brush size at 181. You can just increase it, decrease it. It's just kind of a matter of personal preference. Hit OK. And it's going to render that. And we've got our water now. It looks a little more fluid, maybe. And we need to color this water properly. So let's click our Layers panel and create a new layer. And just call this Water Color. Close up our Layers panel. And grab the Gradient tool. We're going to create a brand new gradient here. We're going to start over on this end, double click on that color stop. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to grab this very light pink, almost hot pink, hit OK. Well, actually, before I hit OK, I'm just going to shift my hue slider up a little bit to make that more pinky. Hit OK, and double click on this slider here to the right, and I'm going to make this sort of a light, almost desaturated blue, kind of like that. So hit OK, and we've got kind of this funky gradient. Select OK, and make sure you're using a linear gradient. Start at the top of the water, click, hold shift, and just drag to the very bottom of the water, or the back of the water to the front of the water. Notice our screen is now completely covered with this crazy gradient. Don't fear. Select the Layers panel there, hold down the Alt or the Option key, and click between the watercolor layer and the water layer. Okay, so we have now just clipped that color layer using the water layer, and now we're going to switch the blend mode to color. And in order for you to see that, I need to move my Layers panel up here. Choose color. Alright, you can see what's happening there. Pretty neat. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this color layer just a little bit, and I'm going to drag my Layers panel back into that dock. Okay, so now we've got this water, and we've got our sky, which is looking pretty wild, and we've got some waves going on in the water. So let's create another new layer and name it Reflect. And close up that Layers panel. Grab your elliptical marquee tool and just draw out a perfect circle. About that size is fine. Use the eyedropper tool. I is the hotkey. And just select a very light yellow off of our planet. Hit Alt backspace to fill that ellipse with that light color. Command or Control D to deselect. Come up here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we're going to blur this pretty severely. Let's try 45 pixels. And let's try 55. Alright, 55 is looking pretty good. Hit OK. And go Edit, Transform, Perspective. We're going to spread this side out by just clicking and dragging one of those handles. Right click and choose Free Transform, and we're going to lay this thing down. And perspective again. Let's pinch that back side in and pull this side out. Again, Free Transform. We're going to just push it back that way a little bit. And right click, hit perspective, and spread this side out a little more. You know what, Free Transform, pull it back toward us just a little bit. It's the reflection of that planet on the ocean or on this lake or whatever it is going to be here. Go to Layers, set this to try Overlay. It's not too bad. Let's try Soft Light. Not too bad either. Let's try Screen. That's kind of rough. Let's go back to Overlay and just reduce the opacity a little bit. Alright, one other thing I just noticed is come back into the Sky group and come all the way down to the planet texture. And we need to blur this texture a little bit because we're really noticing it showing up there after, I guess, putting all those linear burns and things on top of it with this crazy shadow glow effect that's going on at the horizon. So let's try blurring this and see what happens. Just go Blur, Gaussian Blur, and let's reduce that to maybe a 10 pixel blur. And let's reduce it to 3. And we need more than 3. Let's try 5. 5's not too bad, so hit OK with 5. And reduce the opacity even some more. Let's go down to 4. And that looks much better. Alright, come back up here to what we're working on here, the water. Just going to close up the sky layer, or group, excuse me. So we've got the reflection of this on the water. One more thing to do. We got to draw a horizon light. Horizon light. Create a new layer. Name it horizon light. Grab the brush tool, and we want a nice, large, soft edge brush. I'm going to use a 100 pixel brush. I am going to set the foreground to this light yellow, which I have it already set at. And I'm just going to hold down my shift key and click right across, just like we've been doing. Maybe do it a second time, just like that. And let's try setting this to darken. That looks pretty neat if we set that to darken there and just lower that opacity a little bit so the effect isn't quite so severe. Okay, that's it for the water. Select all 4 of these layers and go Layer, Group Layers. Double click on that group, name it water. Okay, I'm going to save my document, Command or Control S. Hey, just generating a full-size composition there for a second. Now, create a new layer. Name this one. Oh, there comes the layer styles again. Name this layer Ground. And grab the pen tool and make sure you set it to vector shapes, and we're going to set the color here to black. Hit OK. Close up the layers panel, and we're just going to draw a nice little bit of ground here basically, and just click outside of the boundaries of the bottom there. So there we go, a nice little plateau sort of thing. Now I'm going to grab my direct selection tool and select this path and just move this anchor point up so that the edge of the water is completely covered. Just like that, looks pretty good. Alright, I'm going to deselect that and come into my layers panel and just deselect that to get rid of the little path going around it. Alright, I'm going to create a new layer and we're going to name this grass. So now you remember at the very beginning, a good long while ago, I was mentioning to you that we had to get those brushes. Well, here's where we're actually going to use them. Flip over to Bridge real quick. And I have these brushes right here. Remember, you can save them anywhere on your hard drive. I'm just going to select the brush or the grass brushes, right click, and choose Open with Photoshop. Now if we come over to Photoshop, come into our brushes panel, grab our brushes tool, we have these grass brushes up here. Right, we get this brush, quite large. We will size them down for our use in just a moment. Alright, one other brush pack, the Suddenly Spring. Right click on that and choose Open with Photoshop. And we have these other brushes now here in Photoshop. Alright, let's start out with this grass brush here. First grass brush in the pack. I'm going to move that off screen. I'm going to make this brush a bit smaller. Make sure you are still working with black as your foreground color. Actually, bring the brushes panel back. I need to set some shape dynamics for this. We want to shut angle jitter, well, not completely off, but we want to reduce it so we don't have the tops or the bottoms of the grass coming up where the tops are supposed to be. So reduce angle to about 10, and then you can even put about 10% of roundness jitter. Minimum diameter will set to about 20%, and size jitter again will be 100. Close that brushes palette by double-clicking up there, and start drawing in some grass. Alright, I'm just painting along this edge here. Just trying to make it look like a grassy edge. So we're right at the shores of this sort of flowing, crazy river with this insane sky going on. Okay. Now let's use the right bracket key to make this grasses brush a little bit bigger and set our foreground color to a very dark gray, almost black. And we're just going to paint in some grass here in the foreground. Ooh, doesn't look very good. We're getting that hard edge of the brush. Open up the brushes panel, select brush tip shape. I just want to rotate this brush kind of like that. I'm just grabbing the arrow on this circle and just rotating it. So now we've got the grassy edge sticking up. Okay, so we've got this darker gray grass closer to us. It's much larger, so it is suggesting some sort of depth of field. We now need to create another layer. Okay, so we've got the grass layer on top of the ground. Select the ground layer, hold down the Control key, and select Create a New Layer to create a new layer beneath that selected layer. Name this layer Plants. Let's close up the layer panel for a second. Open up the brushes panel. And let's choose one of these plants to start off with. Let's grab this one here. This one's looking pretty good. We're going to shut off shape dynamics, however. And I'm going to make this brush much larger. And, oh yes, also make sure you have your foreground color set to black. collapse that brushes panel, and I'm just going to click once here to throw that in, and I'm going to open up my brushes panel again, grab another brush, and this one here, I'm going to add a couple of these little guys here down, sort of at the base of this bigger one, and I'm going to grab this larger brush, and I'm going to make it even larger than it is now, and I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to place it over here, place a couple of them maybe. And now I'm going to grab this brush here. Basically just come through these brushes and choose them and rotate them so that you can increase the spacing here so you can see what actually you're rotating, by the way. We've got that kind of rotating so the stem is going down into the ground. Whoops, we do not want to dock that. And I'm going to add some brushes there. I'm going to flip it along the x-axis, my mistake. And again, rotate it. Just like that. Alright, grab another brush. Increase the spacing so we can see what we've got here. I don't want that brush. I want this brush here. And I'm just going to pop one of these in there. I'm going to increase the size again. I'm going to place one there. Okay, I'm going to move this brushes panel off screen. Well, actually, I'm just going to move it over to the other side of the screen. And I'm going to use my bracket key here. I'm going to draw a couple of these guys. Going to kind of rotate that. And I'm going to choose one of these here. Make it a bit bigger, and put one up there, and let's see, what else do we have here? Let's maybe pop one of these guys in here, nice and large. Okay, just like that. Alright, and that's looking pretty good. Now we got something going on here on the bank of our mighty river. Now, let's collapse this brushes panel for a second, and bring up the layers panel. Let's create another layer on top of the grass, and just name this leaves. Layer styles, don't worry about that. Or leaf. And got that leaf layer selected, leaves layer selected, excuse me. Double click to open up my brushes panel, and I'm just going to grab this leaf brush right here. I'm going to increase the spacing quite a bit. I'm going to go to shape dynamics, increase the angle jitter all the way up to 100, so we've got these things flying everywhere. We're even going to add some scattering. Leave the count at 1, however. Pop scattering up to, I don't know, about 400, and you probably want to do it along both axes. Okay, we're going to now make this brush a little bit bigger, and make some leaves falling through there, maybe some along the shoreline there, and a couple more over here, and just like that, that's pretty darn good. Uncheck both of them. Alright, let's create a new layer underneath our shoreline layer. So we can select the plants layer, just create a new layer, and actually drag this underneath the plants. I should have held down Command and just created that directly underneath there. And name this Shore Glow. I am going to grab a nice big 100 pixel brush, maybe a little larger than 100 pixels. And I'm going to grab another light yellow off of my planet, go back to the brush layer, and just paint along the edge of the shoreline with this kind of glow. Oops, a little bit too much there. Just like that. Go back to your layers panel and try changing this to overlay. I don't like overlay. Go back to normal. Let's just reduce the opacity a little bit, maybe down around 70. Looks pretty decent. Alright, now the last thing to do is, let me flip over to Bridge. I'm going to grab this silhouette of this girl and go File, Place in Photoshop, and it's going to place her right in here. I'm going to scale her down a little bit, just like that. I'm going to tilt her some, have her standing right here amongst this stuff on the shore. I'm going to hit Enter or Return, and go to the Layers panel. You can see she is placed in on her own layer. I want to move her up and just have her standing between the shoreline and the grass. I'm going to duplicate her layer, and I'm going to select the layer in back. I'm going to shut the top standing woman layer off, select the standing woman layer in the back, and go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to blur her about 15 pixels, just like that. I am going to duplicate this layer about twice, Command or Control E twice. Oh, I need to rasterize that layer. So let me show you how to do that real quick. Because it's a smart object, because I used place, I need to rasterize the layer. Right click on the layer and choose rasterize layer. Right click, rasterize layer. I can now merge these two layers, Command or Control E. And now rasterize this layer. And Command or Control E. So we've got this blurred silhouette of her standing on this layer. And I want to go Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and just increase the lightness all the way until it is solid white. Hit OK. Whoops, don't brush anything. Then you can put her back on top, and you can see that it's pretty strong. So what we're going to do, number one, to get rid of the excess white down here, we're going to apply a layer mask. And we've got black as our foreground color now. Select the mask. I'm on that white blurred copy of her. I'm just going to paint down here to get rid of that. Then I'm going to select the layer, and I'm going to set it to Overlay. Perfect. And let me move the Layers panel out of the way. Close the Brushes panel, and there we go. We have just created a fantasy composition piece of artwork here in Photoshop, start to finish from scratch, and boy, that took a little while, didn't it? So hopefully if you followed along, and you certainly will have learned something, at least that is my dear hope, and hopefully now you have the confidence, you have the know-how to go out there and create some of your own awesome looking fantasy pieces of artwork. This is only the tip of the iceberg. This is a very simple one actually, and I certainly hope you've enjoyed watching this. Please check out the site at www.tutvid.com. Thank you for watching.